So, talking on parental alienation, I know many people around the world suffer from parental alienation, and sadly, it's because two parents, two grown parents, two adults can't seem to get past their indifference with one another. And, as strongly as they once felt to have sex or have a child or, consummate their marriage or, bring another life into this world, it somehow fell apart, their relationship, and going through whatever challenges they were faced with, they grew apart. And I don't have to explain this to you. You guys understand this if you're visiting Parental Alienation, whether it's on my website or here or on social media. You know that there's a big issue going on with parental alienation. I've suffered through it for the better part of 2 decades. And my story is very much like yours. I was in a courtroom where they let unrighteousness run rampant. And my ex-wife, who is no longer with us, she died. She was very malicious and very ungodly in her way, and she attacked me and everything that I was a part of for a very long time. And she filled my young son's head full of lies, manipulated him and anyone that was near her. They call it narcissistic behavior. And she basically groomed this child to hate me. And I never had an opportunity to meet him or have him part of my life. She wouldn't allow it. And basically her toxicity inside of her, it killed her. It created cancer. It manifested into cancer, and it just killed her. And there are a lot of people out there who struggle with how to deal with emotions or how to understand how to live life. And so they take it upon themselves to do things in a very ungodly way sometimes. And if you're suffering through parental alienation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When they get in control of a child, they misuse a system to hurt the other parent. And they don't really realize the effects that it has on the children, or they're not thinking long term. Like I can tell you right here, just understanding what parental alienation and malicious parenting is about, I can tell you that my young son is going to be scarred for the rest of his life, emotionally, mentally. I'm sure it's affected him spiritually. He probably doesn't have any sort of foundation when it comes to God, and I know that because you can't teach a child to hate and think that you're teaching them something about God. Like God is not about that. And so, when I think about the effects not only of my young child and all of the rest of my family who has been alienated, I think about everybody else who's suffering through this and how the courts have been turning a blind eye to this for a long time. So that sort of stuff is really bad, and we need to find a resolution for that. In fact, if courts really honored God and they really honored the law, and the law is based on God's word, so let's not fool ourselves here. If they were really doing the right thing by God, they wouldn't be letting malicious parenting and parental alienation and things like that running through the system. Now, where they turn a blind eye to all this stuff is they're in it for the money. And like a lot of organizations that serve money, when they get caught up in a situation like this, it's in their best interest to let people fight. Now, unless it gets called out by, let's say, a higher up, then they'll turn a blind eye to this. And I can tell you exactly how it happened here in Williamson County. Actually, I live in Travis County, but where it happened for me was in Williamson County. Very corrupt place. You can Google it. You can look for yourself anywhere online. If you look at all the trouble that Williamson County has been in over the last decades and decades and decades, for as long as I can remember, they've always gotten in trouble because they break the law and they bend the law and they turn a blind eye to the right thing, and they persecute and they prosecute unjustly and they hide evidence, and they don't really get the full scope of the picture, and they look for convictions and try and squeeze as much money out of whatever situation as possible. I can tell you that for a fact, having been incarcerated in jail, in county jail in Williamson County over contempt for years and years and years and years and years. I kid you not, guys. You can check out my story. But they basically let this woman who had money and wealth and power, they let her dictate how things were going to play out in my situation. And she did a number on me. And she misused the courts. She misused the system. Not only did they oppress me and keep me in prison for a very long time, but they ran up this astronomical debt that I couldn't pay all that they were asking for every time that they were asking for. And so they just kept putting me in jail and kept raising the limits and kept raising the amounts. And the interest just started taking off in this really bad direction. And what they did is they basically prosecuted me for this thing unjustly, because I know the Constitution and I know my rights and I know the way this thing works. And I read the law, and I even talked to a bunch of high-powered attorneys about this stuff, and they said that the only way that they could have prosecuted me, or anybody for that matter, is if I had money and I was simply unwilling to pay. And that wasn't the case. I gave them everything I had, every opportunity that I could, and not only that, but I was working with God to produce this amazing story that maybe you know about, maybe you don't, but you will. So I was producing something, and I was working to do something that was pretty great. Meanwhile, they knew about all this stuff, and they gave into to what her demands were instead of what the honorable thing was about. Even told the judge about this, and the judge knew herself, the one that prosecuted me. She knew that what I was working on, the things that I was doing, did not merit for this to be a criminal case. But the corrupt district attorney at the time, and I'll call them out, whoever they are, and they signed off on this thing, and so the judge and the DA did a number on me, and they persecuted me, and they ultimately said that I had to take this deal or they were going to have my attorney recused. And I've been already fighting this thing almost 2 years. Meanwhile, I had been in jail for years and years and years and years before this, every year for 6 months at a time, like clockwork. So you want to talk about oppression, you want to talk about seeing what's going wrong in the system. I've seen it from the inside out, guys. When I talk about the corruption in Williamson County, I talk about how they've been misusing their systems, how everything is about money to them. I mean, how they try to make it as difficult as possible for the people to get out of their jail once they're there. How they're trampling on not only on the human decency part of life, but on human rights themselves. People are treated like cattle in there. They're poorly taken care of, and the medical attention is a bad thing, the housing is a bad thing. They police the criminals while they're in there, and they basically make it very unpleasant for a lot of people. And guys, like I'm telling you, as a faithful person, because I'm a very godly person, if you know who I am and what I'm about, you know that I wouldn't be telling you something that isn't true. So like I said, getting a look at this from the inside out, I realized that, this was one of the things that I had to go through, not only to better understand what's going wrong with the system, but so that we can bring some resolution to the supposed civil courts of America. I'm talking about the Attorney General's office of different counties and different states. Guys, I have respect for the law, so don't think I'm just bashing on somebody, but I know that there's injustice going on, and there are a lot of people who are suffering. There are a lot of people who are getting hurt because of alienating parents, because of malicious parents, whether it's a mother or a father. When they get control of a child and they have this terrible system in place, like what's going on with the Attorney General's office, guys, I got to be really honest here. There's a lot of corruption going on in this place. This is a big money business now. We're talking billions and billions and billions, and they want to try to secure that nest egg. So they don't want to change this, guys. Meanwhile, children really are suffering. There's a lot of people caught up in the system who are suffering here. I've talked to so many dads, thousands of dads who I've met going through this thing, who've lost it all, who've lost their family, who've lost their kids, who've lost their jobs, their houses, their cars, their investments, their monies, everything, because they couldn't find an amicable situation, and the courts were favoring as much money as they could get from that other parent. So this thing is about money, guys, and here's where I got this big problem with all of it, is that we're supposed to be serving God. We're here to serve God. We're not here to serve money. And we're surely not here to turn a blind eye to injustice. And if you really want to be an honorable place, and this goes for all the corrupt judges that are out there, all the corrupt officers of the court, all the corrupt attorney generals, counties, wherever you are, if you turn a blind eye to what's really going on here, then you're no better than the criminals that are being locked up, the ones that you look down on with contempt, thinking that people are terrible because they can't afford to pay to see their child 2 times a month, right? What kind of parenting is that? What's that doing for our future? What's that saying to our children? That they're not deserving to be around both parents because they can't pay, or because one parent says something about the other parent with all these false accusations. And and there's another thing too. When you go through the motions of all the stuff that's really evident, guys, you got to be a moron not to be seeing what's going on here. But when you see that one parent could say all these false allegations, and then the other parent has to jump through hoops just to appease the court, just to be able to get that much time with their kid, Now we're talking about, when you have to go see a therapist. These therapists are milking the system. Same thing as the lawyers. $10,000 per person, per group, per this, per that, just to be able to get into the arena to fight it out. And that's wrong. And if you really want to get down to it, if you're both good parents, you should be able to raise your kids equally. 50% here, 50% there. Co-parenting, letting both sides of the family nourish that child and help them grow up to be a good person and a wonderful model citizen, right? Well, look at all the different things that have been going wrong with society here. They're coming out from people who are lashing out because they have broken families. Most of the dads weren't around, right? And all of that stuff stems because, quote unquote, these malicious parents can't seem to get past whatever their anger issues or their unrighteous, ungodly issue with that other person. Let's go biblical here for a minute. God says that we're supposed to forgive one another our trespasses. That if I got a problem with this other person over here, I'm going to go and forgive them for whatever it is that they've done to me, and I'm going to be at peace with them. So I'm not going to fight with them. But here we have the courts, the civil courts of America, allowing for all this hatred and vengeance and wrath and retribution and stuff. Guys, it's disgusting. It is. And to think that this is what America has become when I look at families, it breaks my heart, because I'm looking at these kids who are growing up fatherless or motherless or whatever, who are being raised to hate their other parent, and who have basically been signed off by the courts to grow up in that hate. It's wrong. I can tell you firsthand, my kid grew up in that. My young son grew up in that. All the rest of my family were alienated from this child, and he has the worst thoughts of who we are. And if you know anything about who I am, you know that I'm extremely blessed. God has allowed for my life to become a blessing and a testament to not only the Holy Trinity, but to everybody in the world. Right now, I am a living, walking testament to God with the most amazing powers and amazing abilities. I can do absolutely anything in this world, and I can have anything whenever I decide to ask for it. God blesses me undoubtedly anytime, whenever I am in need. And I could have solved this whole thing a long time ago, but God had me going through this for a very specific reason. So, to talk back onto parental alienation a little bit more, I'm going through all this stuff for you guys, really, for God, because he asked me to, but for you guys, so that you can understand that there's a means to an end here. And it has to do with doing the right thing, with being an honorable person, with learning to forgive, with seeking forgiveness, not just from the other person, but from God. Because when two people are fighting and you got that kind of stuff going on inside of you, guarantee you're not right with God. And if you really were doing things in the right way, you wouldn't even be in this mess. I know, I can testify to that. I went through all this stuff at the very same time too, guys. So growing up, though, without being able to be a part of my young son's life, I learned that there are some sacrifices that I have to make, and that we all have to make in this life, and that was one of them. But I also know that I couldn't have become the person I am and produced the works that we have did I not go through all this stuff. So I get it. There's a reason that I'm going through all this stuff. But I know that we can find peaceable solutions. And I know that we can change the law, guys. If not complete abolishment here, complete repeal. We don't need any kind of government agency telling us how to live. God already explained that with the Bible. Following his commandments, living in a Christ-like way, and being compassionate towards one another. I promise you, when we get into an agreement like that, God's going to make sure that our children's needs are always met. And so when we allow for any state agency to interfere with the family or with the upbringing of children, and they're only really doing this stuff to try to manipulate the system and get their part, guys, look into this. We're talking here in Texas alone, $4.5 billion annually is what they're raking in on just their cut alone. That's a big cut, guys, to be interfering in people's lives. Now, I understand if a parent is just really gone and really out there and is a danger to the child. I understand they don't need to be in that other person's lives. I get that part. But if you look at the humanity of what we're talking about here, there are a lot of good dads and there are a lot of good moms who are suffering at the hands of the Attorney General's office because they're allowing for malicious parenting, and parental alienation is running rampant within this stuff. Guys, I promise you, take me at my word. Look into what it is I'm a part of. You'll see for yourself. But, there's good news to all of this stuff, because God doesn't allow this stuff to go on. And I promise you, with him as my witness, that if you won't fix this, he'll fix this. He'll fix this himself. He did this for me with my ex. she basically came to an end, and she met death, and she died, and she's no longer with us because she would not get the message to stop fighting with me. She would not get the message to stop behaving that way towards me and the things that I'm doing with God. She would not stop going after the people who were connecting with us. She would not stop misleading people. She would not doing all these things that were so terrible that God said, listen, I'm going to put it out there. You're going to stop this, or you're going to get stopped. And so when I look back on the things that I was talking with her, because I kept trying to reach out to her for years, but she denied it and she wouldn't find any kind of peaceable solution. So when I look back at the different warning signs for the last 6 months for her, he was putting it out there and saying, listen, you need to stop. You need to reconsider. Listen, I'm asking you not to. You need to let things go. We need to find peace. You need to take different measures here. And I saw the message getting more and more, I guess, to the point where where you're going to get an ultimatum. And finally, that the last month before she died, a few weeks before she died, he basically was moving through me for these different posts. You can look at my stuff on social media, Instagram.com/parental_alienation_, right? And when you look at the different messages that were coming through that last couple of weeks before she was taken, he basically put it on her and said, look, this is your last warning, and if you don't take it, then that's it. And again, she refused, and she didn't want to have anything, and I tried reaching out to her and nothing. And she'd still been trying to pursue wrong action towards me, misusing these courts and whatnot. And she literally got cancer and died like that, like in a matter of days. Boom, that was it, over, done, gone. And I'm sharing this with you because her life has become this terrible warning to people who won't find forgiveness, or who disregard the word of God, and who try to go up against the things that he has. And I can quote many different places within the Bible, but what comes to mind specifically is, do not harm my anointed one, and do not harm my prophets. Like, do not touch his elected people that he has for jobs in this world. And if you know what it is I'm part of, guys, I'm part of one of the biggest miracles that the world has ever seen. And that's not overselling it. This is something that is right up there with the resurrection of Jesus Christ and Moses parting the Red Sea. This is a huge blessing, super huge. And she had been trying to destroy this very thing that God has me bringing to life, that's going to help so many people. So again, it's no wonder that she broke herself on God. And like I said, she's a terrible warning now, and I feel sorry for the people who cared for her. And there was a time in my life where I loved her. I loved her enough to be married to her and ask her to have my child and bring it into this world. And that was where she simply couldn't get past her issues and the things that she was struggling with in life. And I get it. Everybody's got their own battles to fight and their things to overcome. I by God's grace, I got through mine, and I was in a bad way for a long time, if you knew me from my past. But thanks to God, I was able to get through all that stuff. And it leads me back to the things that I'm sharing here now. I become an advocate for parental alienation, and as you can tell, I can talk a lot. I do, but I got a lot to share, and not just with the amazing blessings that I'm a part of with God, but the things that I have learned because of what He has shown me. And having suffered through the things that you guys are suffering through right now, I share this stuff with you, hoping that you'll know that God is going to get you through this stuff, that it's not going to continue. Like the things that we have been going through, this is the end of it, guys. We're not going to be going through this for the rest of our lives. Like, He's bringing about resolution here so that we can heal the families, so that we can heal this world, so that we can get back into a better way of living. Right now, you look at the world and we see all these terrible things happening, like what I'm sharing with you here. Like, this is a travesty of the justice system, that not only they can, oppress and persecute and then prosecute a faithful, holy person like myself in a very corrupt system that says that they're supposed to be upholding the law. If they can do something like this to a person like myself, imagine what they can do to everybody else that's out there who is just suffering through this thing because they're turning a blind eye to what's really going wrong in the system. So, being able to share these kinds of things with you guys and go through these things with you guys is so that I can help you understand that you don't have to go it alone, and that not only has God brought me through this to bring about resolution, but that the end of this kind of suffering is here. We're not going to be doing things like this anymore. In fact, we are making this a movement. 50-50 parenting, right? Abolishment of the courts that are trying to meddle in the family affairs. Guys, as long as we can stand up and take a united stance against this, we can dismiss the Attorney General's interference with what it is that they're trying to do. I promise you, we don't need them in our lives. In fact, the people that try to manipulate the system are the very ones that have brought this change, because not only are they showing the rest of us that this is wrong, but they're also revealing what's wrong with the court and the law, and why we need repeal, and why we need change, why we need complete restructure. If you look at the Attorney General's courtrooms again, guys, this stuff goes on behind closed doors. So this isn't like a jury of your peers courtroom where you get in there and you present your side and everybody sees the evidence and goes, okay, let's make the right choice here. What goes on behind closed doors in the Attorney General's office is you got a corrupt judge who is biased already because their salary is based on the amount of money they're going to be able to rake in. You got corrupt officers of the court because they're already on board because their salary is getting paid, again, by the amount of money that the Attorney General's office can capitalize on. And then you have a biased person who has control of a child one way or another, who is trying to use this broken system against that individual. So you got all these pieces in play that are all set up behind closed doors to do a number on a person like myself, guys. Like an individual who just wants to be, a faithful, servant of God, or a follower of Jesus, or an upright person of society, and wants to be a good parent, wants to do the honorable thing, wants to help in every way they can, wants to be a part of their child's life. Like, you got people like this all the time who get caught up in a situation like this. But because of the terrible laws that are in place right now, things like this have gotten through for years and years and years, decades, guys, decades. This started in the late 70s, so you got to, again, understand what's been going wrong with the system here. So now that God is shining light on what's really going on here, we got movements starting, fathers' rights movements. We got 50-50 parenting movements starting. We got people who are standing up against parental alienation all over the world now. But here in America, we've got 25 plus million people who are suffering at the hands of an alienating parent, or who are caught up in parental alienation in some way or another. And the children are the ones who are really suffering through all this stuff. Guys, meanwhile, who's getting paid here? The state, the county, the places who are trying to administer this justice without the righteousness of God. And if you know anything about God's word, that's just not possible. So when you have a corrupt place like this, who is trying to say that they're doing the right thing, they're simply they're being dishonorable. And again, that's where God has me shining light on all this situation. And again, if you know where I'm coming from, you know what I'm about, you know what this is all about, you know why we're doing this, but I want you to take comfort that change has come. So, like I said, I can talk a lot when it comes to situations like this, and I can tell you countless stories of parental alienation, circumstances and cases and different things that I've seen. But the bottom line is that we need a resolution. And the only way that I know that we can bring about that is with God. So we have to come together, not just in deciding to make the change, but to do what's right by God all the time. And that's what we're bringing to the system here. That's what we're bringing to the United States of America. And that's what we're bringing to this world right now. Change. It's coming.